Hey, this is MC2 Livingston Lewis, and you're listening to Ears Adrift, brought to you by All Hands Magazine. So, this is our first podcast episode ever, and we are super excited to explore this new avenue of storytelling. So, what exactly is Ears Adrift? Well, in one episode, we might explore the life of a pit snipe sailor, how a Navy veteran overcomes PTSD, or discuss Navy regulations, but all the while, teaching you something about the Navy that you might not already know. Okay, so without further ado, welcome to Ears Adrift.
On December 7, 1941, Japan, like its infamous Axis partners, struck first and declared war afterwards. Costly to our Navy was the loss of war vessels, airplanes, and equipment, but more costly to Japan was the effectiveness of its foul attack in immediately unifying America in its determination to fight and win the war thrust upon it, and to win the peace that will follow.
For over 70 years, some of the victims of the Pearl Harbor attack have been unidentifiable. I mean, really think about that, 70 years. So some of these families have been going to grave sites that read Unknown USS West Virginia or Unknown USS California, Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. Now, I know everyone expected us to be in flying cars by the year 2020, but we have some pretty amazing technology already. For instance, a lab can now determine your genetic makeup by a sample of your spit. So imagine what a forensic anthropologist could do with bones. Well, Dr. Laurel Freese and the Defense POW accounting agency are now part of this huge effort to identify those missing sailors on the USS West Virginia and the USS California. But much of this effort is owed to our new capabilities and technology.
The whole reason that we were able to do these disinterment projects is that now, with the science and the technology that we have, we can make the argument that these remains that have been unidentified and unidentifiable for over 70 years, now we have the capability to identify them. So the Oklahoma, was sort of the pathfinder, the way forward that showed we can be successful doing this. And so based on their success, we made the argument to disinter the West Virginia and the California. And so, yeah, the expectations are identical that we will be able to identify all or nearly all of the individuals from those two ships that are still unidentified.
These projects on identifying remains isn't as simple of a process as we're led to believe on criminal forensic television shows. The process is a bit more complicated.
Yeah, these projects can take a really long time. There's so many different things that go on with them. So, first the remains were recovered from the ship. They were processed through a mortuary in the early 1940s. They were interred, they were re-exhumed, they were reanalyzed in the late 1940s. They were reburied again when they couldn't be identified. So all of that has created this commingling among the remains where we have remains with bones from different individuals that are all mixed together.
So they have to separate that out to say these bones go with this person, these other bones go with this other person, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot of anthropological analyses, a lot of measurements, and examination of the bones, seeing which bones match based on their size, their shape, and their age. It also takes a lot of DNA sampling, and DNA takes its own time getting those results back. One sample alone could take weeks or months, but when you have hundreds of samples for a single project, it could take on a life of its own in terms of the time it takes.
So all of these different challenges, trying to bring all these different lines of analysis and information together, really can add up in terms of how long it takes to accomplish one of these projects. So it's not something that can be done overnight or in the span of a couple of weeks. It takes years.
Now, as a sailor, I know why I think the DPAA's work is so important, because I would want my family to have closure if something were to happen to me. Dr. Freese explains why it's so important, even over 70 years later, for these sailors' remains to be identified for their living relatives and for our country.
I think there are so many reasons why this project is really important. Obviously, most immediately, it's important to the family members of these sailors that were lost in this really seminal event in our nation's history. I mean, really a turning point that altered the course of our nation's history from that point forward. They've been waiting for 75 years now for their loved ones to come home. So to have the opportunity to do that, to return these men to their families, is really extraordinary. There's a promise that we make as a nation to our service members and that they make to one another, that no one will be left behind, no one will be forgotten. And this is how the nation executes that promise. This is how we go about fulfilling that. And so I'm always surprised to hear that folks aren't aware that we're doing this. And so it's really important to me to be able to spread that word so that the people do know this is something that's ongoing. And even if it takes 75 years or longer, we're not going to give up. We're going to keep trying. And the constant pace of advancement in science means that something we couldn't do 5 years ago, 5 years from now, we absolutely can do. I think that it's just really, really important for people to understand that level of commitment, that level of dedication. We're not ever going to give up on this.
So guys, if you like what you've heard so far, stay tuned to Ears Adrift because we have an exciting schedule planned for you this season. So follow us on Facebook and check out our website for updates at www.ah.mil. For Ears Adrift from All Hands Magazine, I'm your host, MC2 Livingston Lewis.